At Thanksgiving dinner, my grandson, Ethan, left a note on the table. Gone on a family trip. Clean the house before we're back. Even his wife, Chloe, and their children went along. I simply stared. When they returned, and their keys didn't work in the door, Chloe fainted. This is just a small part of my story. Like, share, and let me know where you're listening from, as I tell you how I rebuilt my life. The old truck bucked and swayed, fighting against the relentless wind. Rain lashed against the windshield in sheets, blurring the world outside into a watercolor of gray and green. Inside, six-year-old Evelyn clutched her worn leather purse to her chest, her knuckles white. The journey to her doctor's appointment felt particularly harrowing today, not just because of the violent storm raging outside, but because of the chilling silence emanating from the driver's seat. Her 8-year-old grandson, Ethan, sat rigid behind the wheel, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Evelyn risked a glance at him. Ethan, the boy she had raised since he was a frightened 8-year-old, orphaned and adrift after his parents' sudden death, was almost unrecognizable. The warm, kind eyes that once looked up at her with adoration were now cold, distant, and utterly devoid of emotion. His usually jovial face was hardened, etched with an unfamiliar sternness. Evelyn had watched this transformation unfold over the past 2 years, ever since he married Chloe. She blamed Chloe, a sharp-tongued woman who seemed to view Evelyn as little more than an inconvenience, a lingering shadow from Ethan's past that needed to be erased. Evelyn tried to make herself small, to not be a bother. But it never seemed to be enough for Chloe. And now, it seemed, it wasn't enough for Ethan either. Suddenly, without warning, Ethan swerved sharply to the right. The truck jolted, throwing Evelyn against the door. They left the familiar asphalt of the main road and bounced violently onto a narrow, deserted gravel track. Her heart hammered in her chest. This wasn't the way to the clinic. Fear, cold and sharp, began to pierce through the general anxiety she'd been feeling. She opened her mouth to ask, but the words caught in her throat. The truck rumbled for another minute, the gravel crunching under the tires, before Ethan brought it to an abrupt halt. They were in an abandoned lot, a desolate, wind-swept space, surrounded by nothing but empty, rain-swept fields stretching to the horizon. There were no houses, no other cars, no signs of life anywhere, just the howling wind and the drumming rain. Ethan cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the incessant drumming of rain on the roof. He turned his head slowly, his gaze finally settling on Evelyn. Her breath hitched. His eyes, usually a soft hazel, were now hard as flint, filled with a raw, undeniable animosity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Get out," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth, any recognition of the woman who had nurtured him, dried his tears, and stitched his clothes for 2 decades. It wasn't a request. It was an order. Delivered with pure contempt, Evelyn stared, bewildered. "Ethan, what are you talking about? It's pouring. We're in the middle of nowhere." She felt a sick dread unfurl in her stomach. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something far more sinister. "Chloe and I are done with you, Evelyn," he continued, his voice steady, merciless. "We're done with the doctor visits, the endless pills, the complaints. You're a burden, an absolute burden." The words were like stones, each one hitting her with agonizing force. Burden, the word echoed in her ears, crushing her. All the years, all the sacrifices, reduced to a single, ugly label. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, mixing with the sudden spray of rain that seeped through the faulty door seal. "But Ethan, I don't understand. I raised you. After your parents, I gave up everything. You were only 8. Her voice cracked, pleading, desperate for him to remember, to see the history, the love, the connection they shared. How could he forget the countless nights she'd stayed up with him, the school plays she'd attended, the scraped knees she'd mended, the dreams she'd encouraged? She had been his anchor, his entire world. And he, hers. A sneer twisted his lips, a grotesque distortion of the kind face she once knew. "Your sacrifices mean nothing now, old woman. You're a parasite. Helpless." He leaned over, reaching across the console, and unlatched her door. Before she could react, he grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong, and pulled. Evelyn cried out, a small, choked sound of shock and pain, as she was yanked from the relative warmth of the truck. She stumbled, her feet sinking into the slick mud. The icy rain immediately drenched her thin coat, chilling her to the bone. She landed awkwardly, her old knees protesting. By the time she had regained her footing, soaked and shivering, Ethan was already backing the truck away. He didn't spare her a single glance. The taillights, two angry red eyes, receded rapidly into the stormy gray, swallowed by the downpour and the desolate landscape. In mere seconds, he was gone, leaving Evelyn utterly alone. The world shattered around her. The roar of the wind, the merciless drumming of the rain, the sucking mud beneath her feet. It all converged into a cacophony of despair. She fumbled in her purse, her fingers trembling, searching for her phone. But there was no signal, just a dead screen mocking her isolation. Evelyn stood there, tears streaming down her face, indistinguishable from the rain that plastered her gray hair to her forehead. Her entire life, built on love and sacrifice, had just been ripped away, leaving her stranded in a wasteland. But then, through the blurring veil of rain and tears, a tiny speck of defiance appeared on the distant horizon. A small, nondescript building, barely visible through the downpour. It wasn't much, but it was a direction, a point of focus in her suddenly chaotic universe. A profound shift began deep within Evelyn. The crushing despair, the heartbreak, the utter humiliation. It slowly began to harden, to coalesce into something new, something resolute. She would not die here. Not like this. She would not let this be her end. Taking a shaky breath, Evelyn lifted her gaze and began to walk. One painful, determined step after another. Towards the distant silhouette. The walk was arduous, the mud sucking at her shoes, the wind attempting to rip her coat from her shoulders. Her body ached, protesting the cold and the exertion. When she finally reached the building, gasping for breath, her hopes plummeted. It was an auto repair shop, abandoned and derelict, its windows boarded up, its large garage doors chained shut. There was no warmth, no comfort, no real sanctuary here. Only a small, recessed doorway offered minimal shelter from the raging storm, a meager overhang that barely kept the worst of the rain from her face. She leaned against the cold, rough wall, utterly exhausted, but a flicker of that nascent resolve still burned within her. She was alive. And for now, that had to be enough. Evelyn huddled against the rough, cold metal of the repair shop door, her thin, waterlogged coat offering no protection from the biting wind or the relentless rain. Every muscle in her body trembled, a violent shiver that seemed to originate deep within her bones. She was not just physically chilled, she was frozen, utterly numb with the shock of Ethan's betrayal. The image of his cold, contemptuous eyes, the brutal words burden and parasite, replayed endlessly in her mind, each iteration a fresh stab to her already shattered heart. Time blurred into an indistinct eternity of cold, pain, and profound despair. Just as she thought her teeth would chatter loose from her jaw, a new sound cut through the storm's howl. The rumble of an approaching engine. Her heart leaped, a brief, irrational surge of hope that it might be Ethan, that he had come back, perhaps filled with regret. But as the headlights cut through the gloom, she saw it was not his truck. This was an older model, a sturdy white pickup, its paint faded and streaked with mud. It pulled slowly into the lot, its lights illuminating her shivering form pressed against the door. The truck stopped, and the driver's side door opened. An elderly man, perhaps around 70, with a kind, weathered face and a shock of white hair, jumped out. He moved with a surprising spryness for his age, quickly making his way towards her. He wore a heavy canvas jacket, and his brow was furrowed with concern. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he called over the wind, his voice gruff but gentle. "You're soaking wet. What in the world are you doing out here in this storm?" Evelyn tried to speak, but her jaw felt stiff, her lips numb. A torrent of words, explanations, and pleas for help choked in her throat. All she could manage was a hoarse whisper. My ride left me." The man's eyes softened with immediate understanding. He didn't question further. The unspoken truth of abandonment hung heavy in the air between them. Left you? In this weather? He shook his head, a look of profound disgust crossing his face. Without another word, he shrugged off his heavy rain jacket, the one thing protecting him from the downpour, and gently draped it over Evelyn's shoulders. The rough fabric was still warm from his body. A small, unexpected comfort that felt impossibly vast in her desolate state. Come on now, dear. Let's get you out of this rain. He reached out a hand, firm and steady. Evelyn, weakened by cold and emotional exhaustion, could barely move. He carefully guided her towards his truck, supporting her as she stumbled on the muddy ground. The simple, unsolicited act of kindness, the warmth of his hand, the genuine concern in his eyes, was too much. The dam broke. Fresh, uncontrollable sobs racked her body, shaking her from head to toe. Tears mingled with the rainwater on her cheeks as she wept, not just for her abandonment, but for the overwhelming relief of finally being seen, finally being offered a sliver of humanity. He helped her into the passenger seat of his truck. The interior was warm, smelling faintly of old coffee and something sweet, like cinnamon. It was a haven. The man, who introduced himself as Arthur Sullivan, closed the door, shutting out the storm's fury, and then climbed into the driver's seat. He didn't ask her to stop crying, didn't press for details. He simply patted her arm reassuringly and pulled away from the abandoned lot, heading back towards the main road. Arthur drove slowly, carefully navigating the slick roads. Soon, they turned into a paved driveway, leading to a modest, ranch-style home, its porch light casting a welcoming glow. As they pulled up, the front door opened, and a woman with soft, silver hair, bundled in a thick cardigan, appeared in the doorway. This was Eleanor, Arthur's wife. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, immediately zeroed in on Evelyn's soaked, distraught form. "Arthur, what on earth?" Eleanor exclaimed, hurrying down the porch steps as Arthur helped Evelyn out of the truck. "Good heavens, darling, you're drenched. Come inside, quick, before you catch your death." Once inside, Eleanor took charge with quiet efficiency. She led Evelyn to a warm bathroom, pulling out a thick, fluffy towel and a clean, oversized nightgown. "Arthur said your ride left you," Eleanor said, her voice laced with an indignant anger that brought a surprising comfort to Evelyn. Imagine leaving an elderly woman out in such a storm. Some people have no heart. The word elderly stung Evelyn momentarily, a stark reminder of her vulnerability. But the anger in Eleanor's voice was directed at her tormentors, not at her. After a long, hot shower that began to thaw the ice in her veins, Evelyn emerged, feeling a tiny spark of warmth return to her extremities. Eleanor was waiting in the cozy living room, a mug of steaming hot tea in her hand, and a bowl of homemade vegetable soup sending fragrant wisps of steam into the air. "Here, dear. This will warm you up." As Evelyn slowly sipped the tea, the warmth spreading through her, the words finally came. Haltingly at first, then with a rush, she recounted everything. The years of raising Ethan, the sudden loss of his parents, her unwavering devotion, the slow, insidious change after Chloe entered their lives, the constant criticisms, the escalating cruelty, and finally, the brutal abandonment in the storm. Arthur and Eleanor listened intently, their faces etched with a mix of shock, sorrow, and simmering anger. When Evelyn finished, the silence in the room was heavy. Arthur was the first to speak, his jaw tight. "That boy, that man," he corrected himself, his voice laced with disgust. "He's a disgrace. After all you did for him? It's unconscionable." Eleanor, ever practical, gently pressed. "Evelyn, my dear, what will you do now? Ethan was your only family, you said." Evelyn looked down at her hands, the warmth of the tea mug, a stark contrast to the cold void in her heart where her family used to be. I don't know." The thought of going back, of somehow trying to salvage a relationship with Ethan and Chloe, was unthinkable. The very idea made her feel physically ill. Eleanor, sensing her hesitation, spoke plainly. "Do you truly believe going back would change anything, Evelyn? Do you think they would suddenly treat you with kindness and respect, or would it be more of the same, perhaps even worse?" Her words were blunt, but not unkind. merely pragmatic. They echoed the nascent resolve that had begun to stir within Evelyn at the repair shop. Arthur placed a comforting hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "You'll stay here tonight, Evelyn. No arguments. We'll figure things out in the morning. Once this storm passes, you're safe here." Later, tucked into a soft, warm bed in the guest room, Evelyn stared up at the unfamiliar ceiling, the comfortable mattress, the clean sheets, the gentle hum of the house. It was all a stark contrast to the cold, wet terror of hours ago. Eleanor's blunt question, "Do you truly believe going back would change anything?" resonated deeply. No, it wouldn't. A profound certainty settled over her. She was not going back. She couldn't. She would not be a burden, a parasite, a helpless old woman ever again. She would learn to care for herself. She didn't know how, or where, or what would come next. But for the first time in a long time, the thought brought not fear, but a flicker of fierce determination. Evelyn awoke to the comforting symphony of a new morning. The gentle clatter of pans from the kitchen, the rich aroma of brewing coffee, and the tantalizing scent of sizzling bacon filled the air. She lay still for a moment, savoring the warmth of the quilt, the soft sunlight filtering through the curtains, and a profound sense of peace she hadn't known in what felt like years. The terror of the storm, the sting of Ethan's betrayal, receded to a distant, muffled ache. For the first time in months, she felt safe. She joined Arthur and Eleanor at the breakfast table, where a hearty meal awaited. The conversation flowed easily, a balm to her bruised soul. As they finished their coffee, Eleanor, ever thoughtful, turned to Evelyn. "Arthur was at the hardware store yesterday," she began, "and he heard something that might interest you. The Millbrook Public Library is looking for a part-time volunteer for their adult literacy program." Evelyn's heart gave a hopeful flutter. A volunteer position. It wasn't paid work, but it was something. A reason to get up in the morning. A place to go. A way to contribute. A spark ignited within her, small but persistent. This could be it. This could be her start. A chance to rebuild, to find her footing in this new, terrifyingly independent life. She nodded, a tentative smile gracing her lips. "I'd like that very much, Eleanor." "Thank you." 3 weeks later, the woman who had been Evelyn stood before the Millbrook Public Library. But she wasn't Evelyn anymore. At Eleanor's insistence, she had adopted a new, softer name, Evie, and she wore a smart, practical outfit of a navy skirt and a crisp white blouse, carefully selected from a local thrift store by Eleanor, who had a surprising eye for finding quality pieces. The clothes, though second-hand, made Evie feel confident, prepared. This wasn't just an interview. It was a declaration. Inside, she met Dr. Lena Kim, the library director. Dr. Kim was a woman in her 40s, with warm, intelligent eyes and a kind smile that immediately put Evie at ease. During the interview, Evie presented a carefully constructed narrative. Evie Miller, a recently widowed woman seeking a fresh start in Millbrook, drawn by its quiet charm and friendly atmosphere. She spoke of a desire to help, to connect with her community, to contribute meaningfully. She omitted the painful details of her abandonment, focusing instead on her passion for reading and her belief in the power of education. Dr. Kim listened thoughtfully, nodding occasionally. "Evie," she said at last, her voice gentle, "your enthusiasm is evident. And I think our students would really relate to you. Many of them are starting over in their own ways, facing new challenges. I think you'd be a wonderful addition to our adult literacy program." A wave of relief and profound gratitude washed over Evie. She had a purpose, a real, genuine purpose that resonated deep within her. A stark contrast to the hollow, unrewarding duty that had characterized her previous life with Ethan and Chloe. This wasn't about pleasing anyone else. It was about genuine engagement, about making a difference, however small. Her first student was a man named George, an older, gruff construction worker, with calloused hands and a perpetually embarrassed expression. He initially struggled, his frustration evident in his tight-lipped silence and averted gaze. But as Evie patiently guided him through the phonetic sounds, breaking down words, and celebrating every small victory, a connection began to form. George, it turned out, was learning to read so he could finally read the newspaper and understand the building codes on his own, without having to rely on his younger colleagues. He was starting over too, in his own way, pushing past shame and fear to build a new foundation for himself. They shared a quiet understanding, a mutual respect born from their shared experience of rebuilding. Evie found immense satisfaction in her work. She had always loved stories, the way they transported you, the wisdom they held, the connections they forged. Now, she was not just reading them, she was helping someone else unlock the magic of the written word. It was a passion she could finally share, truly share, with someone who genuinely wanted to learn, not just with someone who tolerated her presence. With the small stipend from her volunteer work and continued help from Arthur and Eleanor, Evie found a place of her own. It was a charming, albeit small, studio apartment located above Mrs. Davis's flower shop in the heart of Millbrook. The space was bright, with large windows that let in plenty of sunlight. It was modestly furnished, a comfortable bed, a small table and 2 chairs, a tiny kitchenette. But Eleanor had helped her make it feel like home, adding a few cheerful cushions and a potted plant. This apartment, though simple, was profoundly significant. It was hers. Every item in it, every inch of space, was hers alone. It was a tangible symbol of her independence, a physical manifestation of her new life. No longer was she living in someone else's space, dependent on their whims and generosity. This was her sanctuary, her foundation. In the quiet evenings, Evie started journaling. She had never been one for writing down her thoughts before, but now, words flowed freely onto the pages of a small, leather-bound notebook Eleanor had given her. She wrote about the fear, the anger, the pain, and then, slowly, about the unexpected kindness of strangers, the nascent joy of purpose, the quiet thrill of independence. She recorded the details of her day, the small victories with George, the cheerful chatter from the flower shop below. She also noted the surprising absence of any lingering sense of obligation, any concern for Ethan or Chloe. It was as if, in abandoning her, they had also released her from the weight of caring for them. A profound realization dawned on her one evening as she looked out her window at the twinkling lights of Millbrook. Their feelings were no longer her responsibility. Their happiness, their well-being, their opinions, none of it was hers to bear anymore. A vast emptiness remained where her love for Ethan had once been. But in its place, a fragile seed of self-love began to grow. She was Evie Miller now, a woman wanted for herself, not just tolerated, a woman building a new life. One word, one step, one day at a time. 2 months had slipped by, blossoming into a vibrant, purposeful life Evie had once believed impossible. Her days were filled with the quiet satisfaction of the library, helping George slowly but surely unlock the mysteries of words and the simple joys of her little apartment above Mrs. Davis's flower shop. Millbrook had embraced her with open arms, and the kindness of Arthur and Eleanor remained a steady anchor. One sunny afternoon, Evie was enjoying a cup of coffee with Eleanor at the bustling local diner. The air buzzed with snippets of conversation, laughter, and the clatter of plates. As she listened to Eleanor recount a funny anecdote about Arthur's latest DIY project, a fragment of conversation from the booth behind them snagged her attention. And Arthur and Eleanor, bless their hearts, always taking in strays, a woman's voice chirped, a little too loudly. Heard they've got some woman staying with them now, who got herself into trouble with her family. Evie's smile faltered, her blood ran cold. The comfortable warmth of the diner vanished, replaced by a sudden, icy dread. Strays. The word hung in the air, a thinly veiled judgment. She knew, with chilling certainty, they were talking about her. Her carefully constructed new identity, her quiet, independent life, felt suddenly fragile, vulnerable to the insidious whispers of small-town gossip. Eleanor, noticing Evie's sudden pallor, leaned in. Don't mind them, dear. Small town. Everyone knows everyone's business. It's just how it is. Evie managed a weak smile, but inside, a knot of anxiety tightened. Eleanor's words were meant to be comforting, but Evie understood the underlying truth. Her past, the very thing she was trying to escape, could still catch up to her. The carefully built walls of her new life felt permeable, susceptible to intrusion. That night, alone in the sanctuary of her apartment, the unease lingered. The soft glow of her reading lamp did little to dispel the shadows of her past. She gazed at her reflection in the window, seeing not just Evie Miller, librarian volunteer, but also Evelyn, abandoned and hurt. She made a resolute decision. If her past was indeed a threat, she would confront it on her own terms. She needed to properly sever ties, not just emotionally, but physically. With a deep, shaky breath, she retrieved her old phone from the back of a drawer. For the first time since that terrible storm, she powered it on. The screen flickered to life, showing missed calls and a handful of messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Ignoring them, she navigated to her contacts. Her finger hovered over Ethan. Then Chloe. With a surge of defiant resolve, she blocked both numbers, then deleted their contact information entirely. The act felt surprisingly liberating, a visceral severing of the last digital tether. If they wanted to find her, if they truly cared, they would have to work for it. And by then, she silently vowed, she would be ready. Stronger. A few weeks later, the past finally made its move. Evie was at the library, helping George with a particularly tricky passage, when Dr. Lena Kim approached her desk, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Evie," she began softly, "there's a call for you. A woman named Martha Jenkins. She says she's a neighbor from your old town, and she's been trying to reach you." Evie's heart hammered against her ribs. Martha Jenkins. The name was a blast from the past, a sudden, jarring echo from a life she had actively tried to forget. Martha was a notorious busybody, a woman who thrived on drama and the misfortune of others, a human telegraph for every piece of gossip in their old neighborhood. A familiar tightness gripped Evie's chest, the old anxieties threatening to resurface. But then, she remembered her vow. She took a deep, steadying breath. This was it. "I'll take the call," Evie said, her voice firmer than she felt. "Perhaps in your office, if you don't mind. Dr. Kim?" Dr. Kim nodded, understanding, and led her to the small, quiet office. Evie picked up the receiver, her hand trembling slightly. "Hello, Evie." "Oh, thank goodness. It's Martha Jenkins. I've been trying to find you everywhere. Ethan has been worried sick." Martha's voice, shrill and theatrical, was exactly as Evie remembered it. A blast from the past indeed. The words "worried sick" struck Evie as a gross manipulation, a blatant lie. Ethan? Worried? The idea was laughable, almost insulting. "Worried sick, you say?" Evie replied, her voice cool and even, betraying none of the turmoil within her. "That's quite interesting. Martha, tell me, what exactly has Ethan been telling people about my disappearance?" She put a subtle emphasis on the word disappearance, challenging Martha to reveal the carefully crafted narrative Ethan and Chloe must have spun. There was a moment of hesitation on Martha's end, a telltale pause that confirmed Evie's suspicions. Then, Martha, ever eager to share a juicy detail, began to speak, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "Well, he told everyone you had a bit of a breakdown, said you weren't well, and you just wandered off during a doctor's appointment in a terrible storm. He said he looked everywhere, but you were gone." Evie listened, a bitter taste in her mouth. A breakdown. Wandered off. The insidious lie was perfectly crafted to paint her as unstable, to absolve Ethan of any blame, to transform her abandonment into her fault. But as Martha rambled on, a surprising wave of calm washed over Evie. She had expected anger, but what she felt was a cold, hard clarity. This was their story, not hers, and she finally had the power to write her own. This is just part of Evie's remarkable journey of resilience and finding her voice. If you're captivated by her story, please make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. Your support helps us share stories that matter. The receiver pressed against her ear. Evie listened to Martha Jenkins's rambling explanation of Ethan's fabricated story. "A breakdown," she repeated in her mind. a raw fury simmering beneath her composed exterior. The audacity of him, to spin such a pathetic, self-serving lie, painting her as a confused, unstable old woman who simply wandered off during a storm. It was a calculated move, designed to deflect blame, garner sympathy for himself, and perhaps to avoid any awkward questions about his own conduct. Evie gripped the phone, her knuckles white, resisting the urge to shout her rage into the mouthpiece. "So, he claims I just wandered off?" Evie asked, her voice deliberately neutral, almost conversational. Though internally, she was seething. She needed details, needed to understand the full extent of his deception. Did he say anything more about the circumstances? About how an unstable woman managed to disappear without a trace in such a severe storm? Martha hesitated again, a tiny crack in her gossipy facade. "Well," he said. "He said you got confused. You know, with the storm and everything, and you just walked away from the car while he was trying to figure out directions to the clinic. He said he went back for you, but you were gone." The lies were so thinly veiled, so transparently false, that Evie almost laughed. Walked away, as if her six-year-old body, already struggling with the early stages of arthritis, would simply wander off into a violent downpour. Evie kept her voice steady, betraying none of her churning emotions. "I see. And how has Ethan been managing since I've been gone?" She wanted to know. Not because she cared about his well-being, but because she suspected there was more to this sudden outreach than genuine concern. There was a reason Martha had been sent, a reason Ethan was supposedly worried sick. Martha's tone immediately shifted, brimming with the kind of delicious, conspiratorial gossip she lived for. "Oh, Evie, it's been a disaster, a complete mess. You won't believe it. Ethan and Chloe, they're in a terrible financial bind." "Terrible." Evie's ears perked up. "Financial bind?" This was the real reason. Ethan lost his job at the warehouse, Martha continued, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "Apparently, he'd been drinking a bit too much, and they finally let him go about 6 weeks ago. Chloe told everyone it was budget cuts, but you know how it is, and she's barely working her part-time job anymore, always sick. I've even seen her around town with a younger man. You know? Not that I'm one to gossip, but it does make you wonder about their marriage." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Ethan's job loss, Chloe's supposed budget cuts and her new company, the hinted marital problems. Evie recalled all the times she had quietly covered household expenses, paid for repairs, tended to the garden, done the cooking and cleaning. She had been their live-in housekeeper, their unpaid caregiver, and, it now seemed, their personal ATM. For all their complaints about her burden, they had relied on her heavily. Not just for domestic maintenance, but for a significant portion of their financial stability. She had been the invisible pillar holding up their precarious life. Then came the bombshell. "And Evie," Martha breathed, her voice barely a whisper. The house is facing foreclosure. I heard it from Mrs. Henderson at the bank. Such a shame. Such a lovely house. The home Evie had poured her heart and soul into, the one she had helped them purchase, maintain, and fill with her silent care. It was the last tangible link to her life with Ethan, a testament to her unending love and sacrifice. Now, it was crumbling, just like their carefully constructed facade. The truth solidified in Evie's mind with crystalline clarity. Ethan and Chloe didn't miss her. They didn't care that she was gone. They needed her back. They needed her to solve their mounting problems, to rescue them from the very mess they had created by casting her out. The realization brought not anger, but a profound, almost peaceful sense of vindication. "Martha," Evie said, her voice cutting through the other woman's excited rambling, her tone firm and unwavering. "Let me be very clear. I did not wander off. I did not have a breakdown. I made a conscious choice to leave a harmful and unsustainable situation." There was a stunned silence on Martha's end. Evie continued, her voice gaining strength. "I am safe, I am well, and I am exactly where I want to be. I am not coming back. And as for your concern that family doesn't abandon each other in storms, you are absolutely correct. They don't. So, perhaps you should redirect your concern to the people who did the abandoning. Martha, clearly taken aback by Evie's directness, stammered for a moment. Oh. Oh my. Well, I certainly won't tell them where you are then, Evie. Not after hearing all that, but I do worry for them, you know. They seem to be struggling so much. Evie felt a quiet, satisfying sense of justice settle within her. She knew Martha wouldn't be able to resist sharing this new, juicier version of the story, and for the first time in a long time, Evie felt a sense of control. She had taken back her narrative. 6 months had passed since Martha Jenkins's startling call. 6 months of quiet independence and unexpected fulfillment. Evie's days were a tapestry woven with shared stories at the library, the comforting rhythm of her small apartment, and the unwavering kindness of Arthur and Eleanor. She felt a strength blooming within her, a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. The past felt distant, a fading nightmare. Then, one Thursday afternoon, as the library hummed with its usual gentle activity, the past finally materialized. Dr. Lena Kim found Evie in the children's section, where she was helping a young boy pick out a picture book. Dr. Kim's face was pale, etched with a concern that immediately put Evie on alert. "Evie," she whispered, her voice low. "Your grandson is on the phone. He sounds agitated." Evie's heart gave a sudden hard pound against her ribs, a visceral reaction she couldn't control. Ethan. After all this time. But even as the familiar fear flickered, a clarity of mind settled over her. She had been preparing for this moment, consciously or unconsciously, ever since she'd blocked his number. She was ready. "Thank you, Lena," Evie said, her voice steady. She followed Dr. Kim to her office, the short walk feeling like a journey across continents. She picked up the receiver, took a deep breath, and addressed him with a voice that held no trace of the trembling in her hands. "Hello, Ethan." There was a moment of silence on the other end, then Ethan's voice, raspy and choked. "Grandma? Is that really you?" For a fleeting second, it was the voice of the vulnerable 8-year-old boy she had taken in, the one who had clung to her hand after his parents' funeral. The momentary softening almost undid her. But Evie held firm. "We've been looking everywhere for you. We've been worried sick," he insisted, the familiar, self-serving lie already slipping from his tongue. But the facade cracked almost immediately. His tone hardened, laced with a familiar undercurrent of resentment. "Where have you been? Do you have any idea what you've put us through?" The victim narrative, always quick to emerge. Evie cut him off, unwilling to play his game. "What do you want, Ethan?" Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. He fumbled for a moment, caught off guard by her directness. "I want you to come home, Grandma. This has all been a huge misunderstanding. We need to talk. We need to work this out." Evie leaned back in Dr. Kim's chair, a sardonic smile playing on her lips. "A misunderstanding, Ethan? I recall being called a burden, a parasite, worthless and pathetic, before being physically pulled out of a truck and left on a deserted road in a violent storm. That wasn't a misunderstanding, Ethan. That was a conscious, deliberate act of abandonment." "No, that's not. You don't understand." He tried to interject, his voice rising in panic, bordering on a plea. "We were just overwhelmed. We didn't mean it like that. I am not finished," Evie stated, her voice sharp, cutting through his protestations with surprising force. "You are not calling because you are worried sick or because you've had a sudden change of heart. You are calling because you need something, because you and Chloe, you can't manage your lives without someone to blame, someone to take advantage of, someone to pay your bills." The line went silent for a long moment, heavy with unspoken truths. Then, Ethan's voice returned, harder now, stripped of its feigned vulnerability. "You're right," he admitted, the raw honesty shocking Evie slightly. "We do need you, but you need us too, Grandma." A veiled threat. The implication hung in the air. "You're old. You're alone. What will you do without us?" Evie felt a renewed surge of strength. She had faced her deepest fear and survived. She was thriving. "I seem to be managing just fine, Ethan," she said, her voice calm, utterly assured. And with a decisive click, she hung up the phone. The silence in Dr. Kim's office was profound. Evie sat there for a moment, her chest still heaving slightly, but a wave of exhilaration washing over her. She had done it. She had faced him, spoken her truth, and cut him off. The peace, however, was short-lived. Over the next 3 days, Ethan's calls became incessant. Her new cell phone, provided by Arthur, vibrated relentlessly. 62 times, he left messages, each one a descent into increasing desperation and anger. The first few were pleading, filled with apologies, begging her to come home, promising things would be different. Then, as she didn't answer, his tone shifted to anger, accusations, and self-pity. Finally, the true desperation emerged. The house was definitely going into foreclosure. Chloe had packed her bags and left him, taking the children. He was alone, broke, and drowning. His final message, delivered with a chilling intensity, was a raw threat. "I'm coming to get you, Grandma. You hear me? I'm coming to get you." The Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a crisp autumn day that promised warmth. Evie was outside Mrs. Davis's flower shop, meticulously watering the vibrant displays of chrysanthemums and pansies that lined the sidewalk. The scent of damp earth and blossoms filled the air, a familiar, comforting routine. Then, the illusion of peace shattered. A familiar rumble echoed down Main Street, growing louder, more menacing. Evie looked up. Her heart, despite her best efforts, began to race. A frantic bird trapped in her chest. Ethan's familiar, beat-up red pickup truck, mud-splattered and dented, screeched to a halt directly in front of the flower shop. Her breath hitched, but she forced herself to maintain composure. Her hands remained steady on the watering can, her expression calm, outwardly unperturbed. He emerged from the truck, and Evie was genuinely shocked by what she saw. The Ethan, who had abandoned her, had been hardened, cruel, but still possessed a semblance of his former self. This man was a ghost. He had lost a significant amount of weight, his clothes hung loosely on his frame, wrinkled and stained. His once neat brown hair was greasy and unkempt, and his eyes, once so full of contempt, were now hollow, haunted, and rimmed with dark circles. He looked utterly defeated, broken. He took a step towards her, a weak, almost pathetic attempt at a smile on his face. "Grandma," he croaked, his voice hoarse. You look good. Really good. Healthy. Confident." He gestured vaguely at her simple but well-maintained clothes, her bright eyes, her upright posture. Evie met his gaze, her own eyes clear and unwavering. Her old self, the Evelyn who would have deflected or offered a self-deprecating remark, was gone. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady and blunt. "You don't." The comment hung in the air, unexpected, sharp. Ethan flinched, his weak smile dissolving. Can we talk somewhere private?" he asked, glancing nervously at Mrs. Davis, who had emerged from the shop and was now subtly observing from the doorway, pretending to straighten a display. "There's nothing to say that can't be said right here, Ethan," Evie responded, her gaze sweeping pointedly up and down Main Street. "Unless you're embarrassed by your actions?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He was clearly out of his depth, uncomfortable with being exposed. But desperation overrode his discomfort. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," he mumbled, his eyes darting away from hers, fixed on the pavement. For leaving you out there. I was wrong." It was a brief, almost perfunctory apology, lacking any real depth of understanding. Evie set the watering can down with a soft thud, crossing her arms. She wouldn't let him off so easily. "Sorry for what, exactly, Ethan? And what lesson did you learn from being wrong?" He struggled, his brow furrowed, clearly unaccustomed to such direct questioning. "Well, that family is important, I guess, and I shouldn't have treated you like that." He wrung his hands, unable to meet her eyes. "That's a start," Evie said, her voice still quiet but firm. "But it doesn't quite get to the root of what you did." What specifically did you do wrong, Ethan? And why? He looked up, his hollow eyes beginning to ignite with a flicker of the old anger. His voice rose, tinged with petulance. I said I was sorry, Grandma. What more do you want from me? You're my grandmother. You're supposed to forgive me. Evie shook her head slowly, a profound sadness in her eyes, mixed with unwavering resolve. No, Ethan. I'm not supposed to do anything anymore. That's what you taught me that night in the storm. You taught me that my worth wasn't tied to your family, that my purpose wasn't to cater to your needs. You taught me to stand on my own. His face crumpled, the anger giving way to naked desperation. Chloe left me, Grandma. She took the kids. The house is gone. I lost my job. I have nothing left. I need you. Please, I need you to come home. Help me fix this. His pleas were raw, unvarnished, but Evie heard the familiar echo. Rescue me. Fix my problems. Take responsibility for my mess. Evie picked up the watering can again, her hands perfectly steady, and resumed watering a pot of vibrant red geraniums. That, she said calmly, her voice even. Sounds like a lot of problems, Ethan. She said nothing more, simply continued her task, refusing to engage, refusing to be his savior. Ethan's face was a tableau of emotions, hurt, then anger, then back to desperation. Until finally, it hardened into that familiar, ugly mask of resentment and self-pity that Evelyn knew so well. He saw that she wouldn't bend, wouldn't break. He was losing. Fine, he snarled, his voice thick with bitterness. Don't come crawling back to me when this little fantasy life of yours falls apart and you need help, old woman. Because I won't be there. He spun on his heel, stalked back to his truck, and slammed the door. The tires squealed as he pulled away from the curb, leaving a trail of black rubber and exhaust fumes. He disappeared down Main Street, a final, futile gesture of defiance. Evie watched him go, her heart no longer racing, but settled and calm. She finished watering the last pot of flowers, her movements precise and deliberate. Mrs. Davis, who had been an audience to the entire exchange, walked over, her face a mixture of sympathy and awe. Are you all right, dear? Mrs. Davis asked softly. Evie smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached her eyes. I'm more than all right, Mrs. Davis, she replied, picking up an empty watering can. I am exactly where I need to be. 2 peaceful years blossomed into existence after Ethan's dramatic departure from Main Street. Evie's life in Millbrook had solidified into a rhythm of purpose and contentment. Her diligence and passion at the library were recognized, leading to a promotion as the head of the adult literacy program. Her studio apartment above Mrs. Davis's flower shop felt more like home than any place she had ever lived, a haven filled with her chosen treasures and the echoes of her quiet, independent life. Beyond the library, Evie found another calling, volunteering at the senior center, where she taught basic computer skills. The irony was not lost on her. She spent her Tuesdays helping others connect with their families through emails and video calls, while her own biological family ties remained severed, a wound that had healed into a scar. Arthur and Eleanor, her unwavering pillars of support, had truly become her chosen family. Their unconditional love, their easy companionship, and their genuine care had adopted her into their lives, filling the void that Ethan had left. One crisp October morning, as Evie walked down Main Street, the scent of fallen leaves mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, she saw her. Chloe. She looked older, worn, the bright, sharp edges that had once defined her now dulled by evident struggle. She was clearly searching for someone, her eyes scanning the storefronts with a desperate urgency. Evie's breath hitched, but there was no fear, only a quiet certainty. She knew this day would come. Chloe paused for a long moment outside Mrs. Davis's flower shop, her gaze lingering on the window displays, before she finally turned and headed directly towards the library. Evie didn't hide. She straightened her posture, a calm resolve settling over her. She stood at the circulation desk, her smile warm and professional, as Chloe pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped inside. Chloe's eyes, accustomed to seeking out the frail, timid Evelyn, widened in shock when they landed on the confident, serene woman behind the desk. Her jaw dropped. Evelyn? Is that Is that really you? She stammered, clearly thrown by Evie's healthy glow, her stylish, silver hair, and the quiet authority she exuded. Hello, Chloe, Evie replied, her voice even, unhurried. Chloe approached the desk, her movements awkward, her eyes darting around the quiet library. I'm so glad I found you, she began, her voice low. Ethan and we've talked so much about everything. We both have regrets. We said things we didn't mean when we parted ways. The attempt at rewriting history was pathetic, but Evie remained outwardly calm. Did you, Chloe? Evie challenged softly, her gaze piercing. Because I recall your harsh words being spoken constantly for years. They sounded very much like things you meant at the time. Like I was a burden who couldn't keep up with her responsibilities. Chloe flinched, her cheeks coloring. She wrung her hands. I know. Things were just so difficult. And after you left, Ethan just went completely downhill. His drinking got so much worse. He lost everything after I left him. The house. His job. He blames you. You know, he always blamed you. Evie listened, a sense of detached observation settling over her. The old familiar patterns of blame, of shifting responsibility, were still at play. And what exactly do you want from me, Chloe? Evie asked, cutting to the chase, just as she had with Ethan. Chloe took a deep breath, her eyes pleading. We need help, Evelyn. I need help. Ethan needs help. If you could just help us financially, just to get back on our feet, and maybe help Ethan get into a treatment program. Forgive us. We're family. After all, family forgives. Evie felt a profound stillness settle within her. She looked at Chloe, at the desperate woman who once dismissed her so easily, and a quiet strength solidified. I remember the words Ethan used that day in the storm, Chloe. He called me a parasite. Pathetic. He told me to learn to take care of myself. So I did. Evie paused, letting the words sink in. I have changed, Chloe. I am not the woman you and Ethan abandoned. I am a woman who knows her worth, who lives with purpose, who chooses her relationships carefully. And I won't change back to rescue you or him. Not anymore. But we're family, Chloe cried, desperation coloring her voice. You can't just abandon your own blood. No, Chloe, Evie responded firmly, her voice clear and strong. True family doesn't abandon each other in storms. True family doesn't call each other names, or lie, or manipulate. True family shows respect and care. You and Ethan taught me that I had to define family for myself. And I have. Evie walked around the circulation desk and retrieved a few pamphlets from a rack. Here, she said, handing them to Chloe. These are addresses for local social services. They can help you with housing, financial aid, and these are resources for addiction programs for Ethan. You and he must learn to care for yourselves, just as I have learned to care for myself. She met Chloe's desperate gaze. Perhaps in the future, if Ethan gets sober, takes full responsibility for his actions, and offers a genuine apology, we might be able to have a conversation, but that is his choice, not mine, and it will be on my terms. Chloe stood there for a moment, defeated, then slowly turned and walked out of the library, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy, yet peaceful. Evie watched her go, a small, knowing smile on her lips. Chloe would leave Millbrook hoping Evie would change her mind. Evie, however, hoped she wouldn't need to. She returned to her desk, the incident already fading into the background of her new, rich life. Just then, George, her first student, walked in, a wide smile on his face. He wasn't alone. Beside him stood a timid older man. Evie! George exclaimed, his voice beaming with pride. This is Robert. He's ready for a reading adventure. Just like I was. Evie's heart swelled with warmth. She looked at Robert, her eyes full of encouragement, and then at George, a living testament to the power of new beginnings. She picked up a new book from the shelf, a story about hope and resilience, and opened it. Welcome, Robert, she said, her voice gentle. Let's begin a story about new beginnings. In that moment, Evie Miller, librarian, teacher, and friend, knew she was exactly where she was meant to be.